Hello, and welcome everyone to the second episode of this series of the weird and wonderful world of children. This is the fruit of a collaboration between the Baby Brains and Goldsmith University. Today we're here with Dr. Sinead Rocha Thomas, developmental cognitive neuroscientist, and she's particularly interested in how we become such musical beings and the musical aspect of development. She's a lecturer at Goldsmith. And please welcome, feel yourself at home at Baby Brains. You're also trained as a Baby Brains trainer, so that should feel familiar to you.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here, Sylvia. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit, very briefly, how you came to study music and to lecture in psychology at Goldsmith, please?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in music and dance personally, and I started out my career in the amazing Baby Lab at Birkbeck College, Centre for Brain and Cognitive Development, where I got an amazing training in how we can use this incredible tool of babies to understand these really complex questions about the parts of being human, the kind of behaviors that we find most fascinating. So although nobody there was really studying music or dance, because those topics interested me, it was amazing to work with mentors who kind of allowed me to really investigate the topics that I was passionate about. And I've been lucky enough to carry on doing that. So my whole research career so far has been really based around this topic and how it's useful for other areas of development, the changes that it kind of that are reflected in these very natural, spontaneous behaviors, and of course behaviors that bring such joy to parents and families as well. So it's a very nice topic to study. And yes, I'm a lecturer at Goldsmith University. I did my PhD in London at the Centre for Brain and Cognitive Development. I worked at the University of Cambridge as a postdoctoral researcher on an amazing project that looked at infants' language acquisition and the relationships between rhythm and language. And then I worked for a short period at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge as a lecturer there, where I set up ARU Kids Lab, and have now transitioned to the Goldsmiths Infant Lab, which is an amazing facility in New Cross in London, where I'm really passionate about reaching many more families and getting more research done.
Thank you, Sinead. We can really already feel the passion from your words. So thank you so much. And we can't wait to hear you talk about your topic more in depth. And so let me share your presentation here. Yes. I'm going to take notes while you speak.
Okay. So if I just press play, then have you got that full screen?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, great. I can't see you, so just shout, Sylvia, if you need me.
I will.
Okay. So I wanted to start, I titled the talk Music at Home, and I will be talking about music, but really what we study in the lab is more musicality. So whilst music is quite a difficult construct to put your finger on, that can mean different things to different people and to different cultures. Musicality is how we kind of break it down into more objective things that are easier to study in the lab. So each of the kind of component parts of music, so we can think about how we can perceive the beat in music, or how we can move to the beat of music as kind of components of musicality. And I think it's a really important topic for early development because, as I said, I'm a developmental scientist and was really trained to believe that if you want to understand the very cool and complex things that we engage in as adults, as family systems, as societies, then we really have to go back to the beginning and look at the building blocks and the fundamentals and understand how these things kind of come together. And so babies are this brilliant tool because they come into the world, not to say they don't have any experience yet, but it's limited, and you can see the impact of different experiences on their skill acquisition, or different cultural aspects on the way that their kind of outcomes turn out. So in music, we can look at individual differences, and but also at kind of the music that is created by societies as a whole. And these skills are really important across development for really diverse outcomes. So there's kind of fundamentals in there for moving together, for coordinating with other people, for having social interactions, and for understanding speech. So those are some of the topics I'll talk about a bit today. And of course, it's a really very cute topic to study too, which is always nice. So I thought does it work? Yeah. I thought I'd start by the big question that drove me into this area of research, which is, why do we have music? Like, what's it for? What's the point of music? I mean, if we think about other kind of very human behaviors, they serve much more obvious functions. So we can think about language, for example, and we can think about how that helps us to communicate with others in a group, and how we're very sophisticated at working together, and how that might boost our survival chances, for example, through evolutionary time. But for music, it's not necessarily that obvious. And, some people have suggested that music is just like an auditory cheesecake, that it's just something that it's kind of made up of the leftover products of different other parts of evolution. And it's just like a nice thing to have, but not particularly fundamental for anything. I don't personally buy into that, but there are a couple of different schools of thought that I thought I would bring up. So the first is I'm grouping into social glue theories. And the second one, I'm grouping into theories that really stress the relationship between sound and action in the human brain. So I'll start with these social glue hypotheses. So if you imagine like our close relative species, they live in fairly compact groups. And a lot of the way they do their social bonding, their affiliation, is via touch. So, you'll have, to repair a relationship or to build a relationship with someone, you would go over to them and you would start physically grooming them. Now, of course, in humans, our group sizes are really big. Our average group size is like 150 people. And you're often geographically spread from those 150 people. So to maintain your relationships, it's very difficult to go and spend lots of time individually grooming one other member of the group. And you can only do one at a time, which isn't great for when you're with more people. So there's a hypothesis called the groom and gossip hypothesis that suggests that when the group size gets too big for this kind of grooming affiliative behavior, then gossip overtakes. So the kind of chat overtakes, and that becomes the useful way that we bond together. But language also has some constraints. So we would only really talk to about 4 people at a time in a conversation. So if we had a group around a dinner table of like 5 or 6 people, you'd find that you would start breaking off into subgroups of 2 or 3 and having conversations at that level. And sometimes you just need to kind of bond across bigger groups than that. And so music is one way that we can do that. So if you think about probably the most sung song in the world, it might be Happy Birthday, and we'll all kind of join in, an infinite number of people can join in and communicate these birthday wishes to the birthday boy or girl. And so music provides this opportunity for bonding at this larger scale. And there are different suggestions of what functions this can provide. So I wanted to first play this video here, which is of the New Zealand rugby team performing the haka before a game. Which I think is a brilliant example of people moving together. There's no instruments here, but it's very musical. It's very physical. The synchrony between the people is incredible to see. And what that conveys to us and what it conveys to the opposing team before the rugby game is that this is a team that is not to be messed with, right? Not because of the individuals within the team that they're going to, I don't know how rugby works, score more points, I don't know, goals, what are they called? But not that there's like this individual skill, but that this team works together, they move together, they are a tight unit, and that is an intimidating thing. So one of the things we can call this is coalition signaling. We're saying we are a strong coalition and you don't want to mess with us. And so that can be a really useful way of using this kind of signal. Another idea is that what's happening here is that you know, because why would you do this in real life if, like, say you're about to go to war, you know, to have a fight with someone? Why would you not want to like sneak up quietly? Like, why are you doing this? And so one idea as well is like, this psychs you up, right? So when you're all doing this movement together, your heart rates are going to start synchronizing, your breathing, you're all going to have the same kind of physiological arousal, you're going to become much more in the same state. So it can really kind of buoy you all up together, get you all on the same page, all with the same energy. That means, yes, now we go. And you see this in team sports and all other kinds of situations. And then we can also see the inverse, where you might do the complete opposite and use the music to calm someone else down. So when we think about our interactions with our babies, you know, we sing them lullabies to go to sleep because we want it to calm them down. And we can lower their arousal. You know, if they're upset, it's a really natural thing to kind of bounce and rock your baby and sing to them. And one of the things that that's doing is kind of getting their physiological state more aligned with yours. And it can also really help you, I think, calm down and become more in sync with your baby as well. So the kind of evidence that we look at for these social glue hypotheses are varied, but the picture on the left here is of two people in rocking chairs. So there are these very seminal studies where they have mechanical rocking chairs, two participants kind of facing each other. They're not told about anything about these rocking chairs. They're kind of blind to what the study is really about. And then they're rocked either in time with each other, in synchrony with each other, or out of time with each other. And then they test different things. And we find that if you rocked in time together, you like that person more, you trust them more. There's something about being in physical synchrony with someone else that gives you a kind of bond with them. And we see that in babies too. So there's some fun studies where they put teddy bears on rocking chairs and a baby opposite them, and then saw which teddy bear the baby chose, the one that was in sync or the one that was not in sync, and the babies chose much more the in sync teddy bear. And then this GIF on the right here is from a set of studies that were really cool. They put babies in a baby sling facing an experimenter, and they were either bounced in time or out of time. And then after the bouncing, they went to the next room, and the experimenter needed some help with some tasks. So they couldn't reach an object, or they couldn't see where something had gone. They asked the baby for help. And these 14-month-old babies helped the experimenter much more if they'd been bounced in time than if they'd been bounced out of time. So even just these short periods of moving together can form these kind of social bonds, these group effects. Another set of hypotheses stress more of a kind of neurally based link between our auditory areas for processing sound and our motor areas of our brain that process and initiate movement. And so one thing that we do all the time that really involves tight links between sound and action is speech. So speech is a motor act. We have to generate these sounds. And if I were to ask you to repeat after me some string of nonsense syllables like bagadi fala, you could probably just go bagadi fala, right? But well done, Sylvia. But what I'd like you to see now is watch this and see if you think you would be able to imitate it back. So this is an MRI of someone beatboxing. So do you think you could do it, Sylvia?
I couldn't. My son is a beatboxer too, though. He's 12 and he's completely into that. I will give him the challenge tonight.
You have to give him the challenge. So, you know, what I think is amazing for me, at least, is like how much work our tongue is doing and how big that muscle is. Like, it's not something I was really very aware of. You know, you think about your movement as like your gross motor movement, right? Like your arms and your legs and everything, and you don't really think about all the stuff that's going on in here. But it's a really, really complex task. So if you want to understand, you know, if you've heard some speech and you want to repeat it back, you need to map the sound that you're hearing to an action. And those links need to be really, really tight and well established and really core and kind of instant. And if you just just give someone a set of sounds that are completely mechanistically possible for a human, but really outside of their known repertoire of motor kind of skill, then it's an impossible task to reproduce this beatboxing, right? So this is a very complex set of actions. And so having these really tight audio motor couplings help us to kind of decode what we're hearing and translate that into our own motor kind of profiles. And one way that this theory has been tested, that these kind of, so the idea is that then, because we're so kind of tuned in for language, and we need these really tight links, maybe that spills over into some of these musical behaviors. And one of the kind of strands of evidence for these hypotheses use different species who share very few of our kind of other skills and qualities and attributes, but are vocal learners like us. They hear sounds and then they learn to reproduce them and imitate them. So you can think of like your canonical parrot on a pirate's shoulder that repeats back what the pirate is saying. And so this is a video of Snowball, the dancing cockatoo, that I'll play for you now. It's dancing to the Backstreet Boys. So you can see these behaviors that look like dancing. There's the leg lifting, there's the head bobbing, and they've done some experiments with Snowball where they've actually manipulated the music that he's hearing. So, for example, taking Backstreet Boys, and then they're doing slowed down versions and sped up versions and presenting those to the bird, and their Snowball tracks with his movements the beat of the music, even when it's not the rate that he's learned before. So he doesn't seem to just be kind of happens to have this correspondence. He seems to be changing his behavior in response to the stimuli. And because he's a vocal learning species, there's this idea that, yeah, it's these audio motor links kind of set up for vocal learning that might facilitate some of these musical behaviors like dancing. And so of course, when we're thinking about little humans, there's a lot of things they need, right, to form these audio motor links. So they're starting at the very beginning. It's like if I asked you now to do the beatboxing, it's very, very, very difficult. And so you wouldn't just start with that, you know, finessed professional beatboxing performance and say, please copy 2 minutes of this. You would start by breaking it down, and you would give lots and lots of cues. And the way we do that to babies in speech is by using a special form of speech called infant-directed speech, or parentese. And so when we speak to babies across all different languages and cultures, we instinctively use a very special kind of prosody to help our babies learn. So we slow down, we modulate our pitch much more, and we provide more emphasis or stress on important syllables in the speech. So instead of saying to a baby, look a duck, we would say, look a duck. And what that does is kind of give lots of cues in the signal of what the important parts of the speech signal are, gives more breaks, it stresses those vowel sounds, gives lots more anchors for them to really kind of hook onto. And we do see these features across all different languages. So in this study, I want to show you some data from a huge kind of online citizen science project where they took recordings of infant-directed speech and adult-directed speech, infant-directed song and adult-directed song from all different cultures from across the world, all different languages, and then got people online to rate whether they thought they were kind of baby directed or adult directed. And what you can see in these plots here is that the participants could rate the speech and the song as infant-directed or adult-directed, you know, fairly accurately, without knowing anything else. So they didn't understand what was being said. They didn't know what that language was or the context in which it was being spoken. They didn't know who the speaker was. And so they're really using these kind of raw cues in the sound signal that aren't to do with comprehension and semantics and the content of what's being said, but the way it's being said, to classify the speech and the song as infant or adult directed. And so kind of one of the questions is, well, what's the mechanism for this? How does this work? And one possibility is that these rhythms help us to track the signal of speech. So if we think about speech as like a continuous kind of sound wave, there isn't a pause every time I start a new word. I don't only say duck and show a duck and then go away, and it's not a flashcard approach to learning, right? It's very naturalistic. It's all involved in kind of conversation. And so one of the cues that we can use is the rhythm of what we're saying. And we know that this helps with language acquisition. So this does help babies to learn new words more quickly, more effectively. And so I've got in this plot here is a visualization of some sound waves in the kind of gray here, just the kind of spectrogram of the speech. And then in the black line is kind of a mean EEG signal from a person listening to this speech. And the idea is that the peaks in the brain signal might kind of align with some of the peaks in the sound signal. So we can measure this in infants by using these EEG nets, I'm sure many people have seen before, to record their electrical activity that's occurring in the brain as their brain cells are kind of firing in these oscillations. And the idea is, if the oscillations line up well, then that will help us to really lock on to those parts of the speech that are most important. Another thing that I wanted to mention was that rhythm is, of course, music is, of course, not just about listening. Music is a participatory activity across the world. Dance behaviors are really built into music, but also the beat and stuff can be very much generated by body percussion or by physical use of instruments. And so in a lot of my work, I've been looking at babies drumming. So this is a little video of a baby 9 months old doing some drumming to the nursery rhyme Incy Wincy Spider, and we're using motion capture to measure the timing of his movements and the accuracy of his drumming. And what we find is that baby's drumming starts off quite slow and quite jerky, not very smooth, very variable, and they become faster and more rhythmic as they get older, until when they're about 4 years old, their drumming is much, much faster than it would be for us as adults. And they're kind of, as they're learning to control their body better, they kind of become more proficient drummers, but also as they become better at kind of tracking the beats and adapting to what they're hearing. Another behavior that might build into this is walking. So walking is another behavior that gives us lots of rhythmic information. So the tempo of music and of walking are roughly the same, around 120 beats per minute. And some really interesting anthropological work has shown that societies that carry their babies more, so that use slings much more, or have the babies just hold on to the mum's back while the mum is kind of going around her business during the day, produce more rhythmic music as a whole than societies where they use things like a cradle board, which the baby gets swaddled up and put into a nice kind of crib thing that goes on the floor, and they're not getting that rhythmic information from being walked around. And we think this might be really important because of the vestibular stimulation. So the vestibular sense is another sense. It's housed in your inner ear. It's all to do with orientation in space and balance. And you would never really normally notice your vestibular system unless it's gone a bit wrong and you suddenly start to feel dizzy and you've got an inner ear infection, for example. But we know that this vestibular system is really sensitive to rhythm. It changes our perception of auditory rhythms, and it kind of provides like a highway between the kind of music and the kind of sound and the motor stuff. So in some of my work, I've been really interested in baby carrying, because of course for a long time baby's experience of being movement is not actually self-generated. It's generated by us when we're kind of carrying them around, both when they're in the womb and also for a long time until they're kind of really independently locomoting. In my case, long after my kid was independently locomoting, he still wanted to be carried all the time. So we're walking them around and they're getting tons of multimodal rhythmic experience from this. And so I've done some studies where I walked babies at different speeds, and saw how it changed their rate of drumming. And we found that babies who walked at a really fast speed showed faster at drumming at post-test, and babies who drummed at a slow speed did slower drumming at post-test. And the final thing I wanted to share was that there's a bit of a Goldilocks effect in music. So I don't want to say that we need to kind of really simplify everything that we are exposing our babies, our little ones, to when it comes to music. So the studies say that babies enjoy music really that's not too complex, but also not too predictable. So it has to be that perfect in the middle, just right Goldilocks kind of complexity. We also see some perceptual narrowing of their musical perception. So if you're familiar with this concept, it's the idea that your brain starts off like really super plastic and flexible to what input it's going to get. Doesn't know what input language, for example, it's going to be learning yet. So it's quite receptive to all different phoneme contrasts, different sounds. And then as you become more and more experienced in your own environment, your brain kind of becomes much more specialized for the stuff it needs and loses some of the other abilities. So in music, we also see this, that up until about 6 months, babies can perceive really well differences in metrical structure that are familiar or unfamiliar to their culture. But by the time they're about 6-7 months of age, they start behaving more like adults and showing much better perceptual skills for the music that is culturally relevant to them and less accurate with the stuff that's completely outside of their kind of cultural comfort zone. And some other studies have looked at groove, which is this idea of the pleasurable urge to move to music. So the stuff that really makes you want to move when you hear a beat. And the idea there is that there's like an ideal amount of surprise in there. Like it needs to be, again, not too complex, but not too boring. It needs to have just enough elements of interest for it to really set our motor system going, that we're really moving to it. And toddlers and young kids actually seem to find the same music that groovy that adults rate as groovy. So we don't need it to always be nursery rhymes. It can be the music that you love and that gets you moving and grooving as well. So infants show, I wanted to end on this because of course it's so obvious to parents that they enjoy music. But just to say that they, studies back this up, they smile more during music than they do during speech, even though speech is a very rewarding signal. By kind of school age, they can recognize emotions in the music itself and have quite a deep understanding of some of that. And you can really make the interaction suit you. So there are no rules to these interactions. If there's music that you enjoy listening to, I know, I think one take-home message is really that singing to your baby is an incredible thing to do. And of course it is, but I know not everyone feels super comfortable doing that. So having the radio on, having your favorite song playing that you are happy to sing aloud to, if that makes more sense to you than Incy Wincy Spider, all go you. So the take-homes really are that babies really enjoy musical activities. They promote communication skills, physical coordination, and bonding. And they might give us some clues to the origins of a really unique human behavior. So I hope that that's been informative and interesting, and I'm really happy to chat. Sylvia.
Thank you, Sinead. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We've been joined by an extra guest.
Wait, I still can't see. If I press.
Maybe you need to close your presentation.
Yeah. Oh, hi.
Hello.
Oh, look at those rosy cheeks.
Yeah, we are not super healthy today. So that's why no one is joining us. Yeah, there we go. But thank you so much for your hello. Thank you so much for this actually big lecture you gave us. That was really informative. You're saying thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I really like the fact that I really like the fact that you finished with some tips for our parents. May I speak? Do you think you can let me speak? Yeah. Thank you. Because that's something that thank you. Yes, that's something one mom was asking. Thank you. Yes. She was asking whether singing her own music is a good or a bad idea, and whether maybe the inappropriateness of the words is more or less important than the rhythm and all the learning that can happen there. So what would you be? What would
Yeah.
you take there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, if there's lots of inappropriate languages in terms of, actual words that you don't want them repeating, then I would swerve it. If they're at that age where they're repeating back things they're hearing, then you probably don't want them repeating it back exactly. But in terms of kind of more just like generic, if the topic of the song is maybe not very baby friendly, it's about some complex issue that's got a political message or something, I don't think that's going to do much harm. I mean, I think, yeah, at the younger ages at least, it's so much of it is about the kind of the really low level elements. So this tempo, the repetition, and yeah, they're getting so much from it. So I really wouldn't worry and feel kind of constrained that you have to do this um in this kind of baby oriented way. I think what we see lots of is that parents are really using music in their everyday lives, and that's how it should be. We shouldn't overthink that too much. So if you want to put the radio on, if you've got a playlist that really makes you happy and raises your affect and gets you in a good mood, then that's going to rub off on the baby too, right? So yeah, I would say as long as they're not repeating back word for word what's happening in those songs, I'd probably go for it.
Yes, and I was wondering, what can we recommend to parents that maybe don't are not so musical, and feel a little bit awkward, or
Yeah,
they think they sing off tune, and so it's not even
exactly.
worth trying.
I mean, look, this is me. I am not a singer. Like, I am so not a singer. And I get that. I also don't have too many inhibitions, so I'm okay actually to sing out of tune very enthusiastically to my child. Um, but I appreciate that that's not the case for everyone. So I would say, like, this infant directed speech and the infant directed song, it is about kind of exaggeration. So really kind of hyper articulating your vowel sounds, really adding emphasis and pitch, really slowing down. So whichever elements of that you're comfy with are a really good place to start. If you'd rather do it in the quiet of your own home than at a baby group, then go for it, do it that way. But don't feel embarrassed. It's so natural. It's one of the most natural things. And I spoke at the beginning about people who say, well, it's it's because we have language, we have this. I think actually because we have this, we have language. This is the beginning. This is how language comes about, and these signals may feel silly and slow and like you're putting on a funny voice when you're speaking to an adult, but actually this is a very universal kind of natural way to speak to kids. So I think it's a cultural construct that we feel ashamed of it rather than the kind of imposition the other way around.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying that, because at the Baby Brains workshops, we discuss this, and often people say they feel silly, and that by speaking Motherese, parentese, uh, and that and that not only that, but they think it's detrimental to the child's speech development,
Yeah.
because they think you're kind of treating your child as if he was dumb, and it's all the
Yeah.
opposite, right?
It's the opposite, but also I think don't underestimate how well you know your kid, because we also know that the infant directedness of our speech changes over time. So you don't talk to them like they're a 2 month old when they're 12 months. You don't talk to them when they're like a 12 month old when they're 18 months, right? So we see that kids who are slower at picking up language, the parents naturally kind of use the infant directed speech for longer. And if your kids got it, if they're like doing it, then you don't do that anymore, right? And so you're adapting to what your kid is sensitive to. And I found that recently because my little one's just started at school, and now we're like sounding out words, right, for spelling, for reading and writing, and we've kind of gone. It's like, oh, sometimes I go back to it, and I'm speaking in this really sing-song voice again when we're going over, how to make these words and put these phonemes together, because yeah, you adapt, right, and you change to the needs of your child. So I think that the idea that it's detrimental is not true. Like, of course, if you were still speaking to them like that when they're 18 years old, then yeah, probably you're not doing them many favors. But I don't think any parent is. I think we're adapting, and as they become more competent conversational partners, we start to talk to them normally. And now I think I speak to my kid mostly in a normal voice.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And on this inspirational input from you, I think we're gonna say goodbye. Say thank you so much,
Thank
and have a lovely end of the week, and then
Yeah.
beautiful weekend with your little one.
You too, Sylvia, and I
Thank
hope he
you.
feels better soon.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.